count on having a horse next summer." She shaded her eyes with one hand and stared at the car that was just coming into the driveway. "Why, isn't that Dad now? What could have happened to bring him home from the bank before lunch?" Trixie had already darted through the gate and was racing up the path from the vegetable garden, calling over her shoulder. "I'll talk to him right now, and then maybe I can start earning the money for my horse today." At the top of the driveway, Mr. Belden backed and turned the car around. Trixie jumped on the running board, shouting, "Dad, Mother said I could earn the money for a horse if I help with the garden and chickens and Bobby. May I? Please, Dad, may I?" Mr. Belden left the motor running but pulled on the emergency brake. "I guess so, Trixie," he said, "but we'll talk about that later. I've just been to the hospital." He spoke to Mrs. Belden as she joined Trixie beside the car. "On my way into the village this morning, I found old Mr. Frayne lying at the foot of his driveway. He was unconscious, and I took him right into the hospital." "Oh, Peter," Mrs. Belden cried. "That poor old man living up there all alone. I've worried about him so often, but he would never let anyone come near him. He's probably been sick for days." "That's right," Mr. Belden said. "He's suffering from pneumonia, complicated by malnutrition. The doctor said there was very little chance that he would pull through." "Serves him right," Trixie said, wiping her grimy hands on her rolled-up blue jeans. "The mean old miser. You should have left him lying in the driveway, Dad." Mr. Belden frowned. "Why, Trixie, I don't like you to talk that way, and you know you don't mean it. Although Mr. Frayne may not have always been a very pleasant neighbor, he is still a neighbor." "I'm sorry, Dad." Trixie squinted up at the big rambling mansion, half hidden by the trees on top of the hill. "He never seemed like a neighbor to me," she added under her breath. As her father drove away, she turned to her mother. "Why, old Mr. Frayne said he'd call the police if he ever caught any of us trespassing. Remember that time he yelled at Martin?" "Now, Trixie," Mrs. Belden interrupted. "You're old enough to understand Mr. Frayne's attitude. He and your father had a disagreement about the boundary line between the two properties. Of course, Dad didn't want to take the matter to court because nobody really cares who owns that little patch of the woods, but Mr. Frayne insisted. Naturally, when the decision went against him, he resented it." Trixie pulled up a piece of grass and chewed it thoughtfully. "Well, his game chickens come down on our property whenever they please, and you don't complain. And just last week, Moms, Reddy chased Queenie, the black hen, into Mr. Frayne's property. I tore after him because I didn't want him to hurt Queenie, even though she does belong to the old miser. But I needn't have worried because I guess those game hens can take care of themselves. Just as I caught up to them, she suddenly turned and flew right into Reddy's face, flapping her wings and squawking and scratching like anything." Trixie laughed. "Reddy was the most surprised Irish setter you ever saw. He tucked his tail between his legs and dashed off into the woods. And just then, Mr. Frayne burst out of his house, waving a shotgun and shouting at me. Golly, I was awfully scared for a minute, Moms. He said he'd shoot Reddy if he ever crossed the boundary line again." "I'm sorry that happened, dear," Mrs. Belden said as they strolled back to the garden. "But I honestly don't think Mr. Frayne would really shoot Reddy." "I do." Trixie kicked a pebble across the path. "He's such a wrinkled little old man with such a cross face. I bet he doesn't weigh much more than Bobby does. And in those funny patched clothes, he looks like a scarecrow. And his land's in a terrible state. It's all choked with weeds and vines, except for a clearing right around the house, which isn't a lawn anymore because the chickens have scratched it bare." "He wasn't always a wrinkled old man, Trixie," Mrs. Belden said quietly. "And 10 acres was once as much of a show place as the manor house on the other hill is now. Grief sometimes changes people, you know. Before Mrs. Frayne died, he was a charming old gentleman, and he and his wife were very kind to your father and me when we moved up here from the city. That was before you were born, and Brian and Mart were still babies." She carefully slipped a cardboard collar around one of the tomato plants. "I'll never forget the night Mrs. Frayne died."